Ace Podcast.
Black Rum Podcast presents Death Wish 2. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Blood and Black Rum Podcast. I am one of the hosts, Martin, and with me today is now co-host
Ryan
from the moonsdeadworld.net.
That's right.
And today we're continuing our ongoing saga of doing a Death Wish series. And today we're going to be covering the classic Charles Bronson film, Death Wish 2.
That's right. Yeah. It's fun.
Are you excited?
I'm very excited. We're second film into the 5-film franchise. And
how did it ever get there? We don't know.
I don't know, man. I don't know. You know, number 1 really seemed like it left off in like a point where you couldn't really do a whole lot more with it.
I'll say it did. Not a whole lot more, but it did leave room for a sequel.
Well, I mean, he was in Chicago at that time.
And he literally runs into thugs who accost some poor woman. And then he, like, bends down and grabs, like, her shit and then, like, points, like, a finger gun at him, like, winks at him, like, I'm gonna fucking kill you, scumbags.
Yeah, I mean, you could...
So, yeah, you could do a sequel, but is it necessary?
No, I mean, I don't think it's... Well, like I said, what I mean when I say, like, I don't know how much more you could do with it, is that I would expect that it would go a different... You know, if we were going to work on a sequel, it would be something somewhat different and not the exact same thing as the first Death Wish.
Which, Death Wish 2?
It's pretty much the exact same thing.
Same thing, except...
Same formula and everything.
Except cheaper, more of a knockoff.
Shorter,
and worse for wear.
Yeah. I mean, like I said in the original film when we did the podcast last week, there's diminishing returns with Death Wish, but at the same time, you could see how people could make it into many sequels, because you could potentially do the same thing over and over and over again. It starts to make way less sense, as we'll see in Death Wish 2, but you could do the same thing over, and you could just have Paul Kersey becoming more and more of a vigilante where he just kills anybody that is a thug in the streets. And I think with Death Wish, there is some semblance of plot there, although I said that I didn't think it was a very strong plot. I don't think that there's very much there in Death Wish to begin with. It's not even really a revenge story in Death Wish. It's more of a, you know, this happened to me, so I'm now going to take the law into my own hands type of story.
Yeah, it's a vigilante story.
That's right. In Death Wish 2, now it's more of a revenge story.
It's not a vigilante story. It's a revenge story.
Which I actually would have expected from the first one. That it would be more of a revenge story in the first one. And then subsequently, then it would probably just be him being pissed off at criminals and going all vigilante. But that's not the case. And it's kind of a strange way to do the series, I think. But I mean, at the same time, I don't know how much, you know, I don't know how far in advance Michael Winner, the director, was looking when he did Death Wish, the original one. You know, I don't think a sequel was on the forecast for that.
I don't think any of them had the idea that a sequel was on the forecast.
No, I don't think so. Because
it took them 8 years to do it.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking 8 years that from the first Death Wish to the second Death Wish. And for Death Wish 2, it is very near a reboot. You could, if they did not reference the original Death Wish, you could almost assume that this was a reboot and that this Paul Kersey was like an alternate universe Paul Kersey where the same fucking bad thing happens to him. Because there's almost there's nothing that's different about Death Wish 2 besides the fact that instead of going just vigilante, he takes his revenge. I don't know. I mean, I could see that I think it would honestly, we'll get into this later, but I think Death Wish 2 would be better if it just rebooted it. If it didn't even bother with the previous film. Because we get into all sorts of problems with Death Wish 2 logistically. Like, logically, this doesn't make much sense, which I think we'll talk about later in the episode. But I'm just going to say right now, it doesn't really logically make sense for Paul to have done this once before, have the exact same thing happen to him in a different location, and then do it again. So that's my biggest issue with Death Wish 2 by far, without even getting into like the meat of what's happening in this film.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's hard to
I'm
excuse
just enjoying your rant right now.
Yeah, it's hard to excuse some of the things that happened in this film and write it off as like, well, you know, they would be overlooked, or I don't know.
Well, no, again, but I agree with the whole sentiment that the franchise would have been better off if they just didn't even bother.
Or, yeah, well,
there's no need.
If you didn't bother with it, yeah, sure.
They covered enough ground in the first film to, you know, I mean, and because like I said in the first podcast on Death Wish that we did last week, I love Death Wish. I think it's a great film.
Mm.
I can understand where you're coming from and say where it's like the plot's loose. It is a loose story. It's very simple, very basic. It's over the top. But at the time, especially with these kinds of films, what 70s film isn't.
Right.
But I can enjoy it and think it's a great film for all the things that I think it does do right. The fact that it is it is a very common thing that people would wanna it's a thing people can relate to.
Absolutely. Within the time period it was.
And not only that, but as we said last podcast, it relates even to today. Even to today, with how people, those just like how people talk about today when like anytime there's like a shooting or some kind of crime, they're like, well, if this guy had a gun, you could have stopped it.
Well, I mean, I think it has a backwards political stance, and that comes from hindsight, obviously. This was, like we talked about in that original podcast, not so much Death Wish 2, but Death Wish 1 was post-Nixon era, where there's not very much policing in the way of like, we're going to take care of crime, especially in New York City. It was more like, well, you know, it's an ugly thing that we don't really want to deal with.
Well, at the same time, that was the whole part of why Nixon won and became president was the silent majority. This idea that is same way Trump got elected, that the middle America is being ignored and all these things are happening, and we need a crackdown. And that's what Nixon brought when he became president. He brought a crackdown. And so, not only that, he brought the war on drugs too. But at the same time, if you have like these big inner cities, they ended up getting in the shape they're in for several different reasons. But I mean, the whole it's the great juxtaposition of you have this idea of people wanting this crackdown on crime and possibly needing to take it into their own hands because if it's not getting taken care of in where they live, but these same places, are overrun with it. So it's, and how we react to it.
Yeah.
I mean, what is history except like certain things go a certain way for a while, it gets to an extreme, then you have, it's all cyclical.
Yeah, I mean, I don't blame, like I said, I don't blame Death Wish, the original, for its stances on certain things.
Which I find funny, too, because I was reading, too, because it's based off a book.
Right.
Didn't know that. And the writer was appalled with the movie, because his book's very anti-vigilantism. And I just find it great that it's...
Well, and we didn't mention in that first film, first episode, because we didn't really notice it at the time, but on the back cover of Martin's edition of Death Wish, it does label Paul as a bleeding heart liberal. And I would not really describe his character in the film before, post-murder rape as a bleeding heart liberal. More so, like you said, as I don't really
apathetic.
Yeah, I don't really have much.
An apathetic, just moderate, a middle class man who's like a lot of people today, you know, who are kind of apathetic to politics. They're they're fine with where they are. They see things that are wrong, but you know, hey, it's just life, and they're apathetic to it. They're you know, centrist. They look at things at like trying it from both sides, but you know, he's in the first film, he got his coworkers like, those goddamn muggers, you know, crime is up in the city. He's like, well, you know, we live in New York, these things happen, and I wouldn't say like, he's a liberal, bleeding heart, you know. He's
not making a case like, well, you know, we made them this way because, you know, we've been teaching them for years that they are the criminals, and you know, he's not,
and instilling in them that,
No, he's not, and I think that what is strange about Death Wish 2 is that Paul has pretty much reverted to a pre-murder rape scenario, like person in Death Wish 2 as the same kind of person he was in Death Wish 1 before all that happened to him.
He's put everything in a little emotional lockbox.
Yeah, I guess so. Like, he's locked it all away, and now he's pretty much assimilated into society as like a normal person, architect who doesn't think about those things anymore again. And it's kind of weird, but at the same time, like I said, it's kind of a reboot scenario where, you know, you have him in his what I would call moderate stage of political views, where it really doesn't seem like he has any. He's not very outspoken about anything really besides work and his home life. There's nothing else that we get from him.
You don't get a political background.
No, exactly. So like say he's a bleeding heart liberal is just hilarious.
Well, I know. I think they just label him that because in the first film he says he was a conscientious objector. So when he served in Korea, it was, you know.
I imagine though that there are a lot of people who served in Korea who saw what was going on, and they were conscientious objectors and not particularly bleeding heart liberal. They just were in a war, a terrible war, seeing terrible things happen.
I know, like people consider Quakers.
Yeah, right.
Bleeding. No.
I mean, I just can imagine like that scenario. Yes, you saw terrible things happen, and you're not really sure what is right at that point. That's how I feel that Paul is in that film. In this film, it's kind of at the beginning of the film, it's kind of hard to see where he's at politically, or you know, even his views on anything besides what we are given, which is not much. But it really seems like he's reverted back to that, like, well, you know, I can kind of forgive and forget type scenario. I've got a new family now, or a new girlfriend that could be a potential wife in the future, and I have my daughter who's doing better, and now I'm kind of over the fact that criminals made her this way. So I don't know. It's kind of strange how the film kind of reverts to that. But we'll get to that in a second. I think we should move to the beer talk first. Yeah. Because I don't know. I don't want to get into too many different layers of the film.
Gotta save that for later.
Yeah, exactly. And then try to, you know.
Trying to hook the viewer in. Like, oh.
They're a listener on this one. They're listening to us. They could be viewing us, but you refuse to do live. So.
Well. Can't win them all.
That's right. So, I'll let you lead. What are we drinking today?
I think I heard the bus back over me on that one. Today, we got a couple of different beers to talk about. Because on Monday, we went to a local brewery restaurant.
Yep. Local in the fact that it was like an hour away.
45 minutes.
It's an hour. Troy's an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it takes a while to get
Well, you know what? For most people, that might not be considered local, but the fact that we have to drive 45 minutes to an hour to get to anything, then yeah, it's local.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. Because other people would probably take a subway 45 minutes to get to places. Yeah. So, I guess that is local.
Yeah. But we went to Brown's Brewery in Troy, and it's my first time actually ever going there.
Yep. I've been there once before, but I also have growlers to it.
Yep. And never been there before. Have been to a concert, though, before that was, like, connected right next door that they own now.
At the time, I don't think they owned it.
No, they didn't. Yeah. But it was Revolution Hall in Troy. And I saw Streetlight Manifesto there. It was my first Streetlight show. It was really cool. It's really awesome.
Did you skank?
No.
No.
I'm not good. I'm not good at skanking. Try.
You don't have to be good. You just have to be drunk.
Well,
you weren't drunk enough to skank.
No, I wasn't old enough for that.
Ah, yeah, there you go.
Though at the second streetlight show I went to in Rochester, I did, by a crowd surfer, get kicked in the fucking back of my head, and I was pretty pissed off at that. I was about to throw elbows at him. That literally, legitimately, like, annoyed the hell out of me.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Keep your fucking feet, up, you idiot.
Yep.
Well, anywho, we went to Brown's, and we tried a couple of beers there. I tried their whiskey porter.
Yeah.
It was very good.
Yeah, it was good.
You can definitely taste, some notes of whiskey, because their whiskey porter is aged in a bourbon barrel for 2 months. It's very good. Porters overall I like, but I mean, I don't really have like a great affinity for, because I mean, there's such a...
You gotta be in the mood for them.
Such a middle ground.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
You like...
Yeah, I wouldn't say that.
They're kind of porters are kind of in like a weird spot, like just like on like the where they stand as a beer.
I wouldn't say that I'm like in the mood for them often. Like if someone were to give me a choice between a porter and something else, I probably wouldn't pick the porter. I probably would pick whatever else they gave me. Like if it was
or like if it's like a different take on a porter, like a whiskey porter. Yeah. It's like,
yeah, I'd try it. Yeah, sure. Yeah. So with this one, the whiskey porter did sound interesting. It wasn't a huge ABV, so that's kind of a plus too, because we were assuming we're probably gonna have like 2. So you don't want like a really heavy beer at the time, but it was really tasty. I had a sip of yours. And It was really tasty.
Yeah, no, I liked it a lot. It'd be great to have it sold in like a pack, but I know they'll never do that.
Yeah, with Brown's, they're a local brewery, and they're pretty big for the area.
They sell their stuff at the store.
Yeah. I mean, they're pretty big in our area. They're not like some really small microbrewery that you can only get their beer at the restaurant itself. Yeah. Like we can actually buy the beer around our area. But I mean, they are still particularly small in.
I find funny that one of their, their main beers they sell is their Cherry Raz.
Cherry Raz, yeah, it's a pretty eccentric beer.
A very niche beer.
Yeah, for their...
Which I've never had, because I'm kind of scared by it.
Cherry, yeah.
Because, I mean, I like raspberry, and I do like cherries, but at the same time...
Fruit beers are tough.
But at the same time, cherry, if it's like... If it tastes too much like cough medicine... Yeah. It'll totally fucking ruin the thing.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with the grape. And, but the whiskey porter, like I said, it was actually it was a warm day on Monday, so it's kind of weird. Yeah. The whole reason I went with it though, because it's like, I haven't had it, but I mean, like,
warm day here was high 30s.
I broke out the shorts.
Yeah.
But not just in general. I mean, like, I do like porters, but I mean, if there's like a whiskey porter or like a different like type of stout, I'd go with a stout, just because I like that more malty and heaviness to it. But yeah, I thought it was pretty good, and I tried their pale ale, which is just your basic pale ale. But as you said when you tried it too, much weedier and maltier than like a normal pale ale.
Heavy wheat presence at the end of the.
The hops are pretty mild on it, so it's got like a much weedier taste to it than most pale ales. But it's still pretty good. It was very refreshing.
Yep. I had the Triad IPA, which is a triple hopped beer. Well, I should say not triple hopped, but it has 3 hops in it, not triple hopped, because triple hopped would indicate that it was hopped 3 times. Yeah. But it has 3 hops in it. I'm a little bit buzzed right now. I can't remember the hops. Just
I think honestly, one was Citra.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember what they were, but it was very tasty.
It was very good.
I liked it a lot.
It was very refreshing.
Yeah, not super heavy. Though it
was 9% alcohol.
Yep, and not overpowering with those hop flavors. So I really liked it a lot. I thought it was a good IPA. The second beer that I had was the apricot tart, and that's a ghost style beer, a tart flavored beer, and that's not for everybody, honestly. Tart flavors are not for everybody.
Not for me. I liked when I tried it. I liked it, but at the same time, it's so sour, and it's like my taste buds were like just like shaking at it. And I liked like the like fruitiness of it, but at the same time, it's so sour and it's like such a weird mix of sour and bitter, like drinking like apple cider vinegar. It's just I wouldn't be able to drink a whole fucking bottle of it. I just can't.
To be honest with you, I do like tart beers. I do like the Ghost style. It's definitely an acquired taste. I mean, you got to work at it. I don't even know that you'll like it on the first
try
full beer. Yeah, I don't even know. I don't know if it's like one of those, but if you persevere and you try and you keep trying to drink it, eventually you'll like it.
That sounds like you're drinking like Milwaukee's best.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I have found that eventually, yeah, I like the Ghost. The apricot tart, I will be honest with you, it was super tart. I'm not a huge fan of apricots to begin with, but I don't think the apricot flavor comes out like very heavily as much as the tartness just does. Yeah. Like it's just not so much apricot flavored, but just tart.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, drinking the entire glass was a little difficult. Like the end of it is very, very tart. But at the same time, I did enjoy it. I probably would get it again. It's not something that I would recommend to like new people who are trying different beers for the first time,
unless they like sour things.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same, but like
unless sucking on a lemon head warhead was like your idea of fun in the late 90s.
That's right.
Then that beer's for you.
I mean, I liked it. I would get it again. I think it's very tart, but I think anybody who likes the Ghost style would definitely enjoy this apricot tart. I think that's my opinion on it anyway. And that was a pretty light ABV, I think.
3.5.
Yeah, it wasn't that heavy on the ABV, but at the same time, this is a beer that you're gonna drink slow no matter what. You're not gonna be pounding down the tart, honestly.
And speaking of, you're gonna be slowly nurturing and caring for a beer.
I got 2 growlers. Because I do have 2 growlers to Browns. So one of them I got was a double IPA, which I have not cracked into yet.
Save that for next episode.
That's right. But the second growler I got was a 2015 Old Ale, which an Old Ale is a style of beer. It's been aged in some way, and generally it has a sort of fruity, high alcohol content to it. So, when I say fruity, I mean more of a dried fruit flavor.
He means the garbage fruit.
So for this 2015 Old Ale, this has been aged 2 years in bourbon barrels. And I know that Martin did not like this beer very much.
Hated it.
He had to stop drinking it.
Hated it.
I'm actually drinking his right now.
Hated it.
But
I don't. Even beers I don't like, I'll finish. I could not finish
this one. You couldn't get through. The reason for that is that it is very raisiny. It is a very like dried fruit heavy beer.
And as we talked about before when we reviewed Genesee's Double Bock and their Winter Warmer, I do not like raisin.
Yeah.
I don't like raisins. I don't like raisin notes. I don't want raisin hints.
Yeah.
And that's two of the reasons why those 2 beers for me are like, very meh, because they had notes of raisin. This beer literally tastes like they took a bottle of Juicy Juice, let it sit out for 2 years and ferment, and then that's what they got. A raisiny, chunky, 2-year-old high alcohol monstrosity. I absolutely hate it. It's like I was when you poured it and I was carrying it out before we watched the movie. I was literally carrying my glass down by like my belly button. I could smell it. From that far away, and I was like, whew.
Yeah.
And then just by drinking it, it's the first thing you taste when you drink this beer is raisin, pure raisin, and raisin. slight bit of malt, very slight, little bit of like, again, more dried fruit like fig and plum, and then high alcohol. I can't do it. It's awful. Yeah. It's like, I do not want to. When I think of drinking a beer, I do not ever want a beer to taste like fucking dried fruits. Like a shitty little trail mix left over of rye chips, even though I love rye chips, wheat checks, and raisins. That's just bad. That's bad. That's a horrible trail mix, and it makes for a horrible beer.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm not a huge fan of raisins in my beer either. With this one, it is a heavy raisin flavor to it, and I don't necessarily taste a bourbon flavor to it.
Not at all.
No, I don't really get that taste to it at all.
Or an oak, or, anything that would resemble this was aged in a bourbon barrel.
Yeah.
Like that whiskey porter. Really.
No, I agree. I don't get that. I get a heavy raisin flavor. There is a high alcohol content to this. It definitely tastes like alcoholic beverage when it's certainly high on that alcohol. It's a 10%. And I'm definitely feeling it after 2. And I mean, those are the 2 things that you're really going to get, both in the smell of it and the taste of it. With that said, I wasn't a huge fan of it when I first started to drink it, but I definitely grew on it.
I think that's just the alcohol talking.
It could be, maybe. But I definitely grew on it. I drank both of them, didn't I? I drank both.
You need a Rockdale.
So, I mean, that... I wouldn't say that I would probably get it again, but at the same time, I do think that there is merit to an old ale. I've never tried an old ale specifically before that I know of. I feel like maybe Genesee's Winter Warmer now could be considered an old ale with its raisin flavor to it. I didn't really know that was a style of beer specifically. But, I mean, there is some good for this 2015 old ale. I would recommend it to people who are open to the flavor of raisins, but at the same time, if you're not open to raisin flavors at all, then you probably want to skip out on this. I don't really think that there's not a whole group of people that would really like this beer that I can think of.
Very limited demographic.
Yeah, I don't really think there's many people that would...
Just imagine when we go to Beer Fest in a month, if that's the brand, that's the style, everyone, old ales.
Or like raisiny beers.
That'd be awful.
That would be very difficult.
That'll be my worst nightmare. I'll slap every representative there. Like, what are you thinking?
I don't think you can drink much of an old ale like this. This is something that you really have to go slow on.
It's not even like a dessert beer though, because
not really. No,
it doesn't fit with.
It's hard. Yeah,
maybe I guess like a winter warmer.
Now I have a Rockdale to cleanse my palates, and it tastes like water after that old ale.
And if you don't know, because I don't think we brought it up when we were talking about when we did Christmas drinking with the Cranks.
No, Rockdale Light is Walmart's beer.
Walmart brand beer, and you know what? It's not as bad as you'd think it would be.
It's not bad, but at the same time, it is very watery. Like, I'm drinking it now, it tastes like water. It tastes like I am drinking a glass of water.
It has enough... There is a very malty sweetness to it, though. It is pretty sweet. And I'd say compared to like, Bud Light, this has more flavor.
I'll say that...
Compared to Natty Light, even though I like Natty Light more than I like this, and that's not saying much, but I mean...
Yeah.
I would say Natty Light probably has, like, a slightly more, better taste than this.
I mean, in the winter, though, I probably wouldn't choose to drink Rockdale Light.
Well, yeah,
This is a summer beer specifically because you can pound them from after you've come in from, like, mowing the lawn or something, and you're fine. Like, this is like a thirst-quenching beer. Like, yeah. I'm thirsty. I just, like, did some sweaty exercises outside. I need a Rockdale Light.
Yeah.
I could see myself saying that in the summer.
Yeah.
in the winter,
No.
it's not hardy enough to really fulfill what you're looking for.
No, but at the same time, like I said, I don't think this is as bad as. I just don't think it's as bad. I would drink this over several other beers. I mean, I'm just talking about light beers. I would drink this over.
I would drink this over
Bud Light,
Busch Light.
I would drink this over PBR, just regular PBR.
Nope, can't say that.
Because PBR gives me the shits. I would drink this over Jenny Light. Because Jenny Light's an abomination.
Not sure. I've had it once, like a sip of it.
Well, you
Not really sure.
You talk about water. Jenny Light is water. It's literally water they scooped out of the Genesee River and just it's in a can.
So yeah, I mean, it's not bad. It's not great. It's really cheap for the 30-pack at Walmart. So if you're looking for some sort of like bargain, that's it.
And not only that, but to see, just to kind of have like a chuckle.
Yeah. It's a knockoff of Coors Light. Obviously, it's got fucking mountains on it.
Yeah, but every light beer does, because the whole point is like, it's so light and crisp like the rivers that we got the water from.
Mm-hmm.
Don't expect to get drunk off of it, though, unless you pound like the whole case, because it's only 3.5% alcohol.
Yeah, it's really light on the alcohol content, too. Which is good for me, because I'm drinking it, and it's basically like water, and that's what I need right now.
It's like when we went to the Yankee game, 110-degree heat, and
Yeah.
hey, everyone's here got heat stroke. Well, at least I had heat stroke in some form.
Yep.
Here's a Bud Light to hydrate you, and I refused it. This is like, no thank you. I'd rather die.
Yeah. I know.
That was fun. That was a great game.
Alright, what do you say we get to Death Wish 2?
Yeah, I guess we can now.
We got a lot to say about it.
We do.
You start. You're leading.
Well, you're the one that was just leading it, and now you're like, now it's your turn.
Well, I'm trying to lead, but then follow.
You're making it like a tag team, like tagging in,
I like to hear your voice on the podcast. That's why.
I'm glad somebody does. So, as we brought up before, Death Wish 2. I wouldn't say necessarily they should have rebooted, because then at the same time, there's no point in putting 2 at the end of it.
Yeah.
But it is the same plot from the original Death Wish.
Yeah.
Verbatim, same plot. They just change some dialogue.
Yeah, there's a little bit different to it. Like, instead of Paul's wife being killed,
it's his daughter.
It's his daughter and also a maid that he probably doesn't care that much about. Let's be honest. I mean, if we're being honest, he's got a stereotypical, like, Spanish maid. He fucking doesn't care about her that much. So, like, for her to be dead in this scenario, it means nothing. She doesn't even get a funeral if she is dead. The film doesn't even tell us if she's dead. So, really, they don't care about that part of it. You're just assuming. Yeah, you're just assuming. She got railed on by a train of men. They don't, like, the film itself doesn't seem to really want to make this into like a terrible scenario. It's more like, hey, maybe you'll find this a little unpleasant. I don't know. The part of the film where the rape and murder occurs is kind of off tone from the rest of the film, because, and you could say that about Death Wish as well, but in this scenario, I do feel like the rape itself is pretty terrible. I mean, it's a train of men on this one maid who has been, her clothes are ripped off, and then she's, she is used in another room. But at the same time, the film doesn't really want to commit to that level of gratuitous violence or like Clockwork Orange style, sexuality like Death Wish did. Mm-hmm. So Death Wish was more like Clockwork Orange in that aspect. But in this aspect, it kind of wants to have that rape, but then not show the consequences of it or not show any of the actual act of it. I feel like Michael Winner, the director, thinks that that's tactful, but it's really not. it's really just.
Well, you get to see her, her bush and her.
Yeah,
tits,
you get to see the hoo-ha and stuff like that. So obviously,
when they ripped her skirt off, her panties were already disheveled. So obviously, she was just asking for it.
I feel like Winter thinks that's tactful. Like that's skipping out on the rape itself.
But
is it's a service to the.
I don't know if I'd blame him though. I think this whole film, top to bottom, is just an amalgamation of no fucks to be given.
Yeah,
and not only that too. You got to remember the first Death Wish film. It got a lot of flack for being graphic and gratuitous. And as we were talking about when we got done watching the film, violence like the rape scene, is brutal.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's a very brutal rape scene, but the violence in it's very very toned down compared to other exploitive films of the era and that would come after it. Same thing in this film. In
this film, it's almost comical.
So at the same time, I think because of that,
the backlash that they had on Death Wish.
Then it's slightly tamer. But at the same time too, it's kind of funny because this film comes out in '82. You already have all these other exploitive films out that weren't just that just weren't exploitive films, but they became,
Well, the '70s
they garnered some level of either mainstream or cult success, and not only that, you have at this time, the boom in slasher films. So it's not like,
at this time you've got. Now, you had in the late '70s, you had a large Italian horror surge, which most of them became video nasties that were pretty much banned from many countries, like Germany and Britain and stuff like that. Banned from those countries because they were so graphic, Cannibal Holocaust being one of them. And that was post Death Wish 1. So you have Death Wish 2 coming out, and that's mostly, during the time when slashers were really coming to
the forefront.
To mainstream cinema. And Death Wish 2 is actually very much comical in the way that it portrays a lot of its violence. It is bloody, but not in a sense where most people would be turned off by that violence.
Well, no, because at the same time, when people get shot in this film,
they're writhing around
it's like an old western. Like, you got me, partner.
Yeah. It's not very realistic to what might happen when somebody's shot.
Or the fact that Bronson's shooting them with it's not like a Magnum. It's like a 9mm. Wasn't paying that much attention.
They don't make it much. They don't make it clear.
No, I wasn't really paying that much attention to his gun, but it's not like Dirty Harry shooting, somebody with a 44, and you expect them to kind of
burst into
lurch back. He's hitting them with I'm pretty sure it's a 9mm. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but because that, I wasn't paying, like I said, too much attention to what he was using in this, and so it's that's what he's hitting with him. The guy's not flying back 10 feet. He just
there's multiple scenes where that happens.
He got Falcon punched by Captain Falcon himself in Super Smash. That's not gonna happen.
It happens quite a bit. Like the one guy that flies off of the the forklift.
Yeah.
That's probably not gonna punch not even as much as the gun in his previous film, which was a 38, yeah. Which was actually, pretty strong in comparison to what he's got now. I don't know. That's getting into a whole level of realism that I don't think that Death Wish 2 even really wants to comprehend. I think we'll start from the actual scenario where, again, he finds himself into, a gang situation where a gang confronts him in a line when he's buying ice cream, steals his money and his wallet, and then goes to his house to rape and kill his maid, and then, in the process, kill his daughter.
Well, okay, a little kind of backtrack on that. He's not in Chicago anymore. If you listened last time, previously on the Black Rum Podcast, we left off with Paul Kersey is in Chicago because he got scared out of New York.
Yep.
It's been 8 years. Or in this film, just 4 years.
4, yeah.
4 years.
So it's still the 70s.
So it's 1978 apparently, which they're all dressed like it's the fucking 80s. But so he's not in Chicago anymore though. He's in LA.
Yeah.
So you're like, what happened?
Yeah.
What happened to his Chicago killing spree? Chicago missed out on that? God damn. But no, he's in LA now because he met up with an old flame, and she lived out in LA working for a radio station, so he ended up moving out there too. Apparently moving his kid, who's in an asylum, out there too.
Moving not only that, but his company.
It's not his company. He works for that architect company. He's just
It's hard to believe that his architect company spans pretty much every fucking state in the U.S. though.
Yeah, they could.
I doubt it. I highly doubt it.
They're making $500,000 doorways.
That's true. That's true.
Apparently, they must be doing something right. Someone's like, all right, yeah, I'll pay $5. In 1982, willing to pay $500,000.
That's true.
For a fucking door.
I'll grant you that. Yeah, maybe they do have. They do have every major city in the U.S.
That's not the straw that's gonna break the camel's back on this film. Not even close. But so yeah, he moves out to L.A. He seems to be back to normal, living a normal life, enjoying his girlfriend, visiting his daughter who's in the asylum, who seems to be getting a little bit better. She's not doing great because I praised the first Death Wish film and how they kind of deal with the trauma of being raped. That at least I'm not saying they did it perfectly, but at least they addressed the idea that after being raped and like witnessing like somebody get killed, you're going to be traumatized. And you're going to have a hard time, trying to figure out and dealing with this.
Yeah, I mean, she doesn't take it as well as Paul Kersey does.
No, he's the man. He's got a cock and balls. That's all he needs to deal with.
He doesn't.
His problems. But so I'll give him credit for at least again. It was made in 1974. Give it credit. I'll give him credit where it's due. It's been 8 years. What's she doing now? She hasn't gotten better at all. No, she's gone the whole Tropic Thunder full retard route.
Yeah. She's
now just a walking vegetable. Like, yeah, she speaks, once and again, but every now and then we can't really get her to talking. Bronson's still yelling at the doctors, like, you can't do anything? I'm never going to see her be normal again? And they're like, oh, we're trying. And she's just literally walking around like, oh, glass figurine. Oh.
Yeah, this is... What I mentioned when we were watching the film is that this almost feels like the film did not want to deal
with that character,
a kind of character that is somewhat disturbed, and so instead of dealing with it, they got rid of her.
Just rape her.
Yeah, just get rid of her.
Just rape her again.
Rape her, kill her. It's all good.
She throws herself out, off the window. She can't escape. She just throws herself off the window and through a fucking.
I mean, like, yeah. One of the biggest the issues with Death Wish 2 for a lot of viewers is going to be how they treat her character, because she is pretty much brutalized, and really that's all we've seen of this character is that she gets raped, not once,
twice,
now twice.
And this time by like a whole gang line.
Yeah, then a gang of people, and then throws herself out a window to death. And that's kind of saying like you'd rather be dead than raped. and have you seen some like posts on the internet? Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, and I definitely think that stands now. But I think for this film that it looks really bad because they don't want to deal with that character. They would rather just kill her off than say, okay, she has a legitimate psychological dilemma and actually give it a profound meaning.
But at the same time, it's the 80s. Do you really expect them in 80s films to deal with?
I don't know. I mean, I just think that
I'm not giving this like a pass on that, but I'm saying nobody like during this time period was. Let's do it.
I mean, it's really unfortunate for the actress who plays her
Robin Sherwood.
Well, yeah, I mean, she got nothing to do in Death Wish.
No, she did. She got a paycheck, is what she got.
I guess.
Show us your tits again, you know. Well,
yeah, that does happen. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, basically, Death Wish and Death Wish 2 got out of it, like, we got some boobs, and now you're gone, and get out of here. You know, obviously we'll be back for Death Wish 3, but maybe in a flashback. So, I mean, yeah, it's very rough around the edges. I'll say that for Death Wish 2. I mean, to give Paul Kersey the same exact issue that a gang has targeted him, has raped his daughter, and in this case now killed his maid rather than his wife, it's too similar. They needed to come up with something else.
I know, and the whole motive that they have is the fact that they took his wallet from him when he was trying to buy ice cream.
Yeah.
And the fact he tracks one of them down and beats the shit out of them, that's why they show up. It's like, oh, yeah, his wallet, I want to get, revenge. So they show up at his house and break in so they can, beat the shit out of him for it.
Yeah, it's just too similar. I don't...
Wouldn't you think, like, if you, like, that... An old fucker tracked this one guy down after getting jacked and beat the shit... Like, you pull a switchblade out and he still beats the shit out of you for, like... Wouldn't you think, like... I don't want to tell my buddies I got the shit beat out of me by that old fucker.
Right. Yeah.
Just be like, oh, yeah, move on. Take his money, go. You get yourself some ice cream.
Yeah.
No, you got...
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe they were talking to Jeff Goldblum from the first film. Like, yeah, we raped his wife and daughter.
And we got away with it.
And yeah, we got away with it. So,
I don't know. I just don't buy the whole scenario. But that's even not my biggest issue with Death Wish 2. My biggest issue with Death Wish 2 is that once that happens to Paul Kersey and he decides, okay, I need to take up my mantle as vigilante again, that the police do not connect the dots. That's my biggest issue. Because there is no possible way that a Paul Kersey in New York City in Death Wish number 1 was a vigilante who killed a bunch of people. Police force knew about it, but they let him go. Now, Paul Kersey shows up in Los Angeles. Same exact scenario happens to him here. And the police even pointed out to him in this film that, hey, we realize that the same thing happened to you in New York City. And, I can't, that's strange. They pointed out to him. And now vigilantism is happening again. There is no way that a police force does not connect the dots
and bring him in to question him. Like, so,
No way. There's no way. I don't buy that 100%. And that is, I guess, you have, in these situations, in these films, you have to go with, like, some sort of, like, I don't know.
But if the message is to show that, like, hey, vigilantism is, sometimes justified, you have to make the cops look inept.
This is beyond reason, though.
I know, I understand, but, like, you have to. So, like, because Kersey's even telling them, he's like, when they're asking him, like, didn't this happen to you before? He's like, I got, the same thing happened to my wife, and later on they ask him to try to go down to the station, identify the muggers, and he's playing like, it's happened all so fast. I don't know what happened. He's not saying that because he didn't know what happened. He knows what happened. He remembers. He's just not going to tell him because he's going to take it into his own hands. And
he doesn't rely on the cops at that point.
And so the cops like, it might jog your memory, and he's like,
I think cops are inept. I think sometimes our legal system does harbor a possible, it's hard to sometimes get the justice that you deserve. At the same time, this is stretching it way too far. This is why Roger Ebert gave this film 0 out of 4 stars. Because he could not get past the concept that a police force that is working in tandem with the New York City police force could not figure out that Paul Kersey was in 2 different places where vigilantism occurred.
So he gave Black Christmas a 0 out of 4.
No,
because the only competent film in that film is John Saxon.
That's true. The competent cop in that film is John Saxon. But I can't buy this from Death Wish 2. And I think that's the biggest problem with this film, is that I would be okay with it if they gave some other reasoning behind Paul Kersey's movement to track down criminals.
I think it would have been a smarter idea to have the lead inspector in L.A. be the one kind of following track and not bringing back Vincent Gardenia as Frank Ochoa.
Yeah.
I think
it doesn't make sense at all. Really.
To have a New York cop come out of his jurisdiction all the way out to fucking L.A. because the whole reason is like, shit, we let him get away.
Yeah,
we knew it, we didn't shit. So it's like oh, we're dirty cops, so we gotta kind of go and fix this shit again. It would have been smarter if they just had whoever, the main cop in L.A. try and track it down. Like, I think it's this guy. We're going to try to figure out if it is him. Just have it like that, and then that makes much more sense. And then you can have Vincent Gardenia back as, like a cameo role, and like being like, oh, how'd you deal with the vigilante? And then him, telling his spiel about like, oh, this is how we did it, but
yeah,
in hindsight, he wasn't that bad because our crime has gotten better. To push that message that,
I think that's the biggest thing, is that you want to have, for this film specifically, because it is pro-vigilantism, it is make sure that you you take justice into your own hands if people aren't going to do it for you. I think that maybe if they had, at least used Vincent Gardenia as a message for the LA cop, like, maybe he's doing some good here. Maybe we can't police everything.
Just let him go.
That would have worked better than having Vincent Gardenia come back as Frank Ochoa in L.A., which you said now he's acting as a vigilante. He is basically the same thing as Paul. Then except
it's not just he's acting as a vigilante. He's doing it to cover his own ass, because again they let him go, so his bosses make him go over there to try to stop him again. So it's like Batman v Superman. Superman's pissed off because Batman's a vigilante. It's like, Superman, you're a vigilante too.
Yeah.
No one said, hey, Superman, save us from fucking Zod. You just decided it'd be a good idea, to destroy half of Metropolis in the process. Yeah. And now you're like, oh, Bruce Wayne, he's an asshole. So, I mean, it's the same thing. It's
one thing I will say about this whole Los Angeles setting, though, is that I do prefer the revenge aspect of Paul's work to Death Wish 1, which was just basically like, I'm going to kill random people because they are.
I think the first, and that's where I think the first one, that's a problem with the first one. I think he should have done what he did in the first one, killing just random criminals, but at the same time go after those that
actually did something to his family.
So he's still looking for revenge, but at the same time, when he sees people who are doing that kind of shit, he snuffs it out.
Yeah,
because the cops aren't able to do that. So I think that would make it a more impactful, like, vigilante story. Like, I think the fact that they didn't have him go after, because it's like if they did have him just go after it, then it'd be like, oh, it's not vigilantism, it's revenge.
Yeah.
But I think if you have him doing both, it becomes more, you can justify it more that he's doing, you see him doing it because that's his motivation. You see going after who hurt his family, his motivation. But at the same time, the fact he's targeting other people too is showing that he, it's not just a matter of revenge. It's a matter of, it's not safe to walk the streets and, people are getting mugged. And, this is how I'm going to deal with it. And I kind of find it funny that, and not just this film, in the original Death Wish, but in Death Wish 2, they also, everyone's just a fucking mugger. I wouldn't, once these people break into his house and rape his daughter, and what, they're not just, they're muggers. They're rapists and murderers.
Yeah.
So it's, it's kind of like, he's just killing muggers. It's just muggers that broke it. No, they're rapists. They're murderers. Muggers is just kind of something that also they do.
Yeah, and I mean, apparently that's pretty much rapist is their claim to fame, because that's in Death Wish 2. That's all that they're doing, really, is they're picking on specific women to grab and then whatever they're going to do to them later. Because
not only that, too, we see several times there's some account like when Charles Bronson's tracking these people down, and he's like watching them. They're like lifting up random chicks' skirts and like smacking their ass and like groping their boob, and there's people around.
Yeah.
Not just like other thugs, but other people around. And they're kind of like, hey, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't touch her pussy like that. That's not right. You know, this woman's getting accosted on a bus, sitting next to an old man with a cowboy hat who I'm sure has kicked the shit out of some punks in his day. They're like grabbing her tit, and he's like, hey, don't do that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's like, wouldn't you, like, even if you're going to get the shit kicked out of you, wouldn't you want to at least like stand up and try and do something about that? Like,
Maybe that's what it's saying.
Maybe in my fantasy world, I mean, I'm thinking that people would do that, but I do realize at the same time, being in that situation is a total different thing.
Yeah.
But it's, you'd like to think people would react to, like, if that was happening.
They would want to
try to do something. Even if you know you're going to probably get the shit beat out of you, too, in the process. You might want to.
Maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the point of Death Wish 2.
I don't think they were thinking that deep.
That's true.
It's kind of like with Dawn of the Dead. I think people are thinking a little too deep on that. You might be thinking a little too deep on this one, too.
That's true. But what we haven't talked about is the crazy soundtrack to this film.
You mean amazing?
Yeah, that's right. Amazing. So, there's a lot of different stuff in this film.
A lot of things going on musically.
Yeah. It's messy, to say the least.
Haphazardly slapped together.
So,
inspiring from, like, all different parts of, like, cinema.
So, Jimmy Page does the main theme.
That's right. As you can hear in our intro, that song that we play is, that's right, the Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin doing that theme. It's just funny thinking about it.
But the rest of the composing is not done by Jimmy Page, which it would seem like from the credits.
The opening credits, they say music composed by. They don't say intro, they say music composed. So you'd think like, oh, did he do it? But if you, as we did, stick around and watch the end credits. No, it was some.
Yeah, it was a different person that did the rest of the composing. But this film is just filled with all kinds of different compositions, and they don't really fit together.
And they're constant. There's like no scenes with any silence.
Right.
He's walking down the street, gotta play something jaunty to go with it.
Yeah. It's constantly it's tone deaf. There's no real attention to detail within these scenes. So when there's something depressing happening, there may not be music to cue you in that you should be depressed about it.
As I said, there's a lot of music, I was talking to you about at least. There's a lot of music in this film that's very, like, 80s sitcom-y or soap opera-y, like, just like, oh, he's having a tender moment with his girlfriend. Kind of like, it's like, doo-doo, like electric piano that you would hear back then. Oh.
Yeah. You almost expect to hear, like, the audience,
yeah. And then as soon as, like, something, like, it's supposed to be, like, horror-related, it's, like, literally, John Carpenter, like, stings of, like, synth, like,
there's actually a sting when he's writing out a
letter.
It's actually like an ID card for a mental hospital. He's writing out the name of a doctor on the ID card, and he messes up. So he balls up that paper and throws it on the floor. Misses his trash can. There's a sting. A legitimate, like, horror sting that has missed the trash can. So as the viewer, oh shit, that's going to be something later on.
And it is.
It is something later on.
I'll give the film credit for at least it's something later.
Yeah, right. The worst thing that they could do was actually just skip over it.
Drop
Just not really care about it after the fact.
They just totally drop
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. No, at least they do actually care about it later on, and they come back to it. But, yeah, I mean, the whole Death Wish 2 as a whole is very much an amalgamation of things. It's not as clear-cut as Death Wish. I feel like Death Wish probably is the key film in this series. I haven't even seen 3, 4, or 5, but I'm just imagining that the original is probably the best.
Well, yeah,
after seeing Death Wish 2.
Well, that's like Dirty Harry.
Yeah.
Anyone gonna tell me what the rest of the Dirty Harry films are? And give you a hint. Guarantee you most of you cannot name another one of those sequels.
Yeah.
I can, but I'm telling you that most other people, I guarantee, probably can't. Because you want to know why? Those films aren't any good, and they're not worth the time or effort. I won't say that about Death Wish, because...
You think 3 is better than 2.
Well, we'll talk about that, yeah.
I mean, I think that Death Wish 2 suffers from the common sequel problems, is that it's trying to copy the first one, but doing something new. And there's not a lot new to do with the vigilante themes that it's got. It's also not tackling the issues with vigilantism that the original film did. So there's no real
impetus behind the film?
Yeah, and there's no reference to like the world accepting the fact that there's a vigilante in Los Angeles at this time. Like the first film had magazine covers that were devoted.
Fucking, as we mentioned on the last part, every fucking publication in the 70s worldwide was talking about vigilantism in New York.
Yeah.
Time. People. Apparently people used to run not, celeb gossip bullshit.
Yeah.
It was Newsweek. The kids like highlights or whatever the fuck. Every newspaper and any article was being published on billboards everywhere too. In LA, it's like no one gives a shit. It's like, hey asshole, you're in LA. Get in line. There's a whole,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the problem though with this theme is that I think that the well has run dry for this. That vigilantism works. In this film, it honestly feels like Death Wish 2 is saying that, you know what, it doesn't really work, but Paul Kersey's doing it anyway.
At some points they do, because at the end when he kills his last victim, you have one of the guard that let him in come walk in and see him, and he just, after he sees the dead body that he killed, and he sees that Kersey's been stabbed and wounded, and he's just sitting there, and you hear Bronson say, he raped and killed my daughter, and he's like, yeah, I read about it. And he's like, okay. And the guy's like, I'll give you 3 minutes. So the fact that he's even calling the cops on it and is showing that that it's not right.
Yeah.
That if he thought it was a justified murder, he would be like, yeah, the cops are coming and we'll just sort this out. It's not a big deal. You'll get off. No one's gonna give a shit.
Right, because I could honestly see Death Wish 2 playing it up like that. Where Paul continues to play the part of the doctor and says, yo, he attacked me. He was...
That would have made more sense.
I could not stop him from attacking me. He was psychologically, deficient. And, I had to do what I had to do. And that would make more sense within the film's political stance than what actually happens.
Because they are basically saying in this film, too, they reference it quite a bit, is just like, when they're talking about, they say they're not doing electroshock therapy anymore, because you doctors think it's barbaric, but,
yeah.
You're doing this whole therapy, trying to get in touch with their feelings.
Right.
And so what they're basically saying is, they're animals, kill them anyway,
Yeah.
Should shock them until they, maybe become upstanding citizens. So it's like this...
Yeah, this film
very loose grasp on like psychology, where it's just like, hey, you give them this pussy treatment, you should be shocking them,
Yeah.
My aunt, when in the 50s, she had a lobotomy, she turned out all right, drooled a little bit, but
I think the biggest thing with Death Wish 2, too, is that, at least in Death Wish 1, the criminals never really stood a chance of being caught. It was kind of like a one-off thing where Paul happened to occur had a scenario where this occurred, and he dealt with it. Wherein in Death Wish 2, there is a time where Paul is trying to track down one of the members that raped and murdered his daughter, and he knows that the cops are going to arrest him anyway for the murder of a cop. It's going to happen. Yeah. There's no way that it's not going to happen. And yet he is determined to kill that person before the cops arrest him.
But the film tries to justify it because the guy got off.
Yeah.
Because he was high on PCP. So he was in a right mental state. He's getting, because there's the evidence is circumstantial and he was on PCP. We're just going to say, he's got to go to a mental institute. So it's like, Kersey's justified in doing what he did because the justice system let him down. And that's what they're trying to get across, but at the same time, it's,
Yeah.
It's not like, they're saying, it's funny too, because, say that, because the man kills the detective from the first film, Frank Ochoa.
Yep.
And he gets off for it. But at the same time, he assaults the shit out of several police officers, throwing them around like rag dolls and like he's fucking Hulk Hogan. And you're gonna tell me, we're just gonna put in the 80s and even today, they're not putting somebody in a fucking mental hospital for being high on PCP and beating the shit out of cops. He's going to jail for quite a while for assault of a police officer. They're not until he gets to the right mental state.
Yeah.
It's not, he was on PCP. You're not gonna be in the right.
Yeah.
I think it's just they're using it as like a scapegoat.
They are
to get to the whole.
Yeah, this film
of justice failing Kersey again.
It wants to. Yeah, it does it in any way possible to give him the right to go and kill people. I believe, and I think that here it unravels. Like you can see, maybe he didn't make the right decision in this scenario, but he's kind of stuck with that. So he has to fix it in whatever way possible. I don't think that it works as much as Death Wish, and I didn't even think Death Wish worked that well. But I think here in Death Wish 2, there's not that much to go on that really you're not really rooting for Charles Bronson's character so much as you're thinking like he's honestly kind of psychologically demented now. Like I said in the film, I think you would better read this film series as Paul Kersey losing his mind and finding everyone around him to be psychologically demented to the point where he has to murder them in order to maintain the peace. I think that seeing him as the person who has the deficiency is more accurate to what you would find than this film shows, because honestly, so far the Death Wish series has shown pretty much everybody has a form of either criminality to them or mental retardation to the point where they cannot be rehabilitated into society.
Well, they're just the Utes.
Right, exactly.
The Utes of America.
The Utes of America, they cannot be rehabilitated into normal society. They are just lost, and someone has to deal with them. And maybe that was the thinking at the time, but it's now watching this film, it's very comical to the point, it just doesn't make sense. It's almost like watching somebody who has a psychological impairment walk around thinking everybody's out to get him, because that is what Death Wish is. Literally everyone is out to get Paul Kersey. And I would much rather see this as him being damaged than society being damaged, because it's a more uplifting.
I just love the fact that there's all these fucking Ute thugs out there doing all this shit, and people are just like, "Oh no, stop!"
Right?
They're everyone in this. Apparently, everyone in society is Willy Wonka.
Yeah.
No, stop, please, don't. Wait.
Yeah.
That kind of bullshit ain't gonna be tolerated. Doesn't matter where. Like, you know, if there's enough people, again, like I said, people aren't gonna tolerate that shit.
Yeah.
You know, like, not, you know. Someone's gonna go up and like smack Lawrence Fishburne in his ass and be like, "Cut that shit out now!
Yeah.
Stop wearing stupid glasses."
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest problem with Death Wish 2 is that just much of it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't really fit with the theme of the previous film. It feels very tone deaf. I think that it wants comedy where comedy isn't really even...
Shouldn't be a comedy.
Yeah, there's no reason why some of the antics of, you know, the New York City police officer, Ochoa, should be comical. You know, I think it worked in Death Wish 1 to a certain extent, but in Death Wish 2, it really feels like it's forced.
Yeah.
And I don't... It almost feels like Vincent Gardenia is a part of the Three Stooges. It just does not feel authentic to this role at all. I think they really pushed for Ochoa into this film. His presence isn't even necessary.
No, like I said, all he had to be is a cameo.
Yeah.
Just make, instead of it being him as like the focal point detective, just have it be the LA one.
Yeah.
And then trying to deal with it.
Yeah,
and then as they're making the connections between, you know, Kersey and the vigilantism and then what happened in New York, and then he can contact the NYCPD and then have him talk to them.
Yeah.
And talk to Ochoa briefly. That'd be like a nice little, you know, cameo. But no, they had to be like, oh, gotta throw him in there. You know,
yeah.
People are gonna be like, oh yeah, he was in the first one. He had like an asthma thing, and you know.
We haven't talked about Paul's like new lover in this film, but I think that Jerry, which is played by Jill Ireland, who is actually Charles Bronson's wife in real life, I don't think that she's necessary, and I think that this film is trying to make a love interest out of it that goes nowhere at the end of the film.
It goes, not only that, it goes, I think the whole purpose of her being there is to show, like, that's his connection to, like, normalcy, is the fact that he's, you know, trying to reconnect with somebody. And so at the end, you can see that the vigilantism, when she finds out that he really did all those things, and she leaves, you know, without telling him, and that, you know, he's like, oh, he's paying the price for taking justice into his own hands. But it adds up. It adds up to nothing because you don't feel it. It's not like, oh, it's
the conclusion to this film is really weird. It's a out of nowhere thing where Jerry leaves him. She's supposed to marry him. They're supposed to like go off to Mexico and get married, and she leaves him because she finds out that he has actually been committing all these murders. So in a sense, Jerry is the audience supposed to find like, well, Paul's been doing some pretty shitty things lately. But at the same time, I don't think that the film wants us to associate with Jerry. I feel like the film wants us to find Paul in the right and Jerry just not...
She just doesn't understand.
She doesn't understand where he's coming from. And that's a really mixed message. And it doesn't make sense. And the film's conclusion is a very abrupt ending to this film. Because it doesn't even address the emotional impact that it has on Paul. He doesn't seem to care. He doesn't care about anything. He's literally a psychopath. He doesn't care. He just does not care. He has no feelings whatsoever. He goes back to work. He's fine. He has no worries about being implicated in a vigilante crime spree.
Again, yeah. Like, we even thought, like, hey, maybe after, you know, so somebody might catch wind, like, hey, didn't Paul Kersey, have his wife killed in New York by muggers, and there was a spree of vigilantism, now it's happening here?
Yeah.
This incredibly intelligent man didn't think about, any of these things.
He doesn't care. It's just, I don't know. It's mind-boggling how that would happen. I think that the ending to this film leaves a lot to be desired. If you were going into this and you were thinking, like, I need a sequel to this, that ending would pretty much put an end to, like, your enjoyment of the series. I don't see how you would be hoping for a Death Wish 3. But as we know, it came. We got another one, and another one, and another one.
We didn't talk about the acting at all yet.
We didn't talk about the acting, and we also didn't talk about Paul Kersey's disguise, his hat.
He looks like Joe Pesci from Home Alone.
Yes, he does. I
in Los Angeles, running around with like a fucking ski cap on.
Yeah.
I know it's not covering his ears, but still, like, everyone's like, hey, buddy, 75 degrees here.
I feel like somebody thought that Charles Bronson would look pretty cool with a ski cap on.
Intimidating, yeah.
It does not. It is the exact opposite. I feel like he is an old demented man who is
homeless,
who's like walking around the streets of LA and people are like, "Are you okay, sir? Do you need a room for the night? You know, you're wearing a ski cap. It's 75 degrees outside." Yeah, I don't know.
And the fact that no one recognized him from his fucking mustache, his pencil.
Yeah, that's true.
His pencil.
The first thing to go if you were going to be a vigilante and not want to be recognized is your mustache. That's the first thing.
Oh, hey, it's the same guy with the pencil thin mustache, but he doesn't grow hair in the middle.
I agree. Yeah, that and you want to cut your hair.
Yeah,
because he has a pretty. I would think that's a pretty distinct haircut.
Feathered bob cut for
I mean, for the acting itself, this is a film that legendary Ebert gave 0 out of 4 stars, which means that he didn't even find any artistic value in Death Wish 2 at all. I think that, I think he was being a little bit of a grumpykins on this one. I do think that
he's known to be.
Charles Bronson phones in his performance, but it's not too much different from the original Death Wish.
No. But it's not even him phoning it in. That's the word. Like, everybody.
Yeah.
His wife, Jill Ireland, is a total fucking bore.
Yeah.
Totally bore. They should just name this film, like, Wooden Plank.
Yeah.
Everybody is so wooden in this film. Even when they're trying to come across as like, oh, ha, ha, everybody, across the board, wooden.
It's pretty bad when the most exciting portion of your film is the soundtrack, because it's all over the place. You never know what you're going to get with that soundtrack. So, I think that's probably the main draw of Death Wish 2, is that the soundtrack is eccentric.
Jimmy Page? Yeah, you got Jimmy Page on there.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that Charles Bronson, he's kind of phoning it in this one as Paul Kersey. He doesn't really have to act that hard. But at the same time, like, Jill Ireland, absolutely, like, in it for the paycheck because she's Charles Bronson's wife and she gets to be in it because he asked for her to be in it. I think that's probably the main reason she's in this at all.
Like, hey.
Ochoa is in it because he was in the first one and they want to link to the first one. I don't know, and he gets a paycheck. I don't think there's anything else to do with that. And then everyone else is really not even a factor in this film.
Except Lawrence Fishburne.
Lawrence Fishburne, who also he goes in this film by Lawrence Fishburne III, but you'll definitely know him.
Oh yeah, when you see him. Like Jeff Goldblum, like all great actors that come to be in Hollywood, you start off as a low-bit, 2-bit raping hood.
Yeah.
So not just Jeff Goldblum, kids. You also got Lawrence Fishburne.
And unfortunately...
Isn't that great to think of that? Look, they both got their start, like, oh, would you start in career? I was a rapist in Death Wish. And unfortunately, Lawrence Fishburne, he gets ridiculous 80s sunglasses, like he's trying to look like Bret the Hitman Hart. Jeff Goldblum gets to say, "Goddamn rich cunts, I hate rich cunts."
Yeah.
I mean, who won that one?
Yeah, I mean, well, with Lawrence Fishburne in this film, he's not even that memorable.
No. No, compared to
At least Jeff Goldblum is memorable in that film.
But Lawrence Fishburne is now. I would say he's memorable now because you can look at like, oh my god, that's Lawrence Fishburne.
I really feel bad for him in this film because he gets like a stereotypical part of a hood.
Yeah, but so is Jeff Goldblum playing like just.
Yeah,
like,
but Lawrence Fishburne is black, and it really feels like that's like a jab at like black people. He gets to fucking dance around on a pole to like 80s rock music. It's really, I don't know. It's just it's a product of the time.
Well, like I said, you should play the clip from Hollywood Shuffle.
Yeah, I know.
Black acting school.
That's right.
What'd you get to play?
Probably now looking back, I would assume that he's a little bit ashamed of Death Wish 2.
Maybe he's like, get my foot in the door. Who knows?
That's true. Who
knows? Could it be any worse than being Cowboy Curtis on Pee-wee's Playhouse?
I don't know.
With that Jerry curl?
I don't know.
God, he should have been in Coming to America with that Jerry curl.
Yeah.
Let his soul glow. So, out of 10, I'm trying to think of a good one here.
Yeah.
Out of 10 Charles Bronson mustaches. What would you give?
What I give
Death Wish 2?
Death Wish 2. I gave Death Wish 1 as 7.5. I think I'm gonna have to go a full point lower and give Death Wish 2 a 6.5.
Really?
Yeah.
You're nicer than I am.
Really?
Yeah. 5.5.
You're gonna give 5.5.
This film.
So you dropped 3 points from Death Wish 1 to Death Wish 2.
And again, this film is enjoyable for the sheer soundtrack idiocy. This is what I would say is a film that it's so bad you have to watch to enjoy.
Yeah.
It is. I would put it up there, but it's not like it's enjoyable as some others. I think this film, like, it just totally misses the mark. It's like so off key.
Yeah.
That it compared to the first one.
It's really hard.
Like, even if you like the first one, you're gonna like I do. It's gonna be hard to be like, yeah, well, you know.
Well, it's really hard to believe that like almost everybody on this film was in the first one.
Yeah, the same director.
Yeah,
you had Bronson. You had some other recurring characters.
Yeah, Ochoa, Vincent Gardenia is a recurring character. You get Robin Sherwood as Carol Kersey. She comes back just to kind of be retarded, but it's really hard to believe that the same people who made the first one, which I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't enjoy as much as I probably as you did, for one thing. But it's hard to believe that the same people who made that film made this film and really just fucked up so much more.
Well, like I said, I think that I don't think it has to do with the people on it. I think it's more just nobody cared.
Yeah.
They were all probably getting the call to make this movie. Like, really?
Yeah.
You want to do a sequel? How much am I getting paid? Right. Oh, all right then. Yeah, let's do a sequel. Yeah, I can't give it a 6.5. Just because there's just so many flaws. And it's just... And you know what? For an hour and 28 film, this...
yeah, it does. It feels interminable. Yeah.
It does. There's a lot of stuff in here that you just don't need. You don't, like you said, you don't need Jill Ireland. You don't need that faux love story of him, like oh, because it was vigilantism, he lost, some semblance of humanity there, right? You don't need any of that. And you could have had a different means for him to become the vigilante again. You didn't have to have the same damn thing happen again.
Right.
It just... It's just like I said, it's like everything they did right in the first film, they made sure to do wrong here. Yeah. Just like, let's see how we can fuck it up.
That is true. I agree with that. Definitely.
So, I mean, I'll give it a 5.5, though. Even though I'm giving it a low score, I will say I do enjoy it for the fact that what it is, an unintentionally campy mess.
I think that Jimmy Page's opening theme song is pretty catchy.
No, it's great. I love it.
But other than that, the soundtrack is really messed up.
I do love the soundtrack, too, just because of the random, like, Carpenter-inspired, like, synth stings. Yeah. Like, Like, it's, again, like, as I was telling you, it's like they're watching, like, some Jello, like, Tenebrae, like, oh, yeah, we're gonna have, like, these, little synth and vocoder stings, like, wah,
Yeah.
wah,
I mean, I enjoy it a little bit, but I think in the film itself, it really doesn't work. But I'm really interested to see what 3, 4, and 5 hold for us.
It'll be fun.
Because we got those coming up.
Yeah.
3 will be our next episode, and we'll work through 4 and 5 as the series progresses.
Yeah.
So stick around for our next episodes in the podcast series. We are excited and somewhat hesitant to view those. You've seen 3, 4, and 5, right?
Yeah.
But just probably once or twice.
I've seen 3 a couple of times, so I know 3, but 4 and 5 I have only seen once, and I don't remember as well.
Yeah.
I just remember being very skeptical on them.
Yeah. So I'm interested to see 3 because you said you liked it more than 2. So
for all the right reasons.
I'm definitely interested. A little bit of administrative duties. We are on iTunes. You can subscribe to us and leave us a nice review. We appreciate that. It helps us get noticed. We're up on SoundCloud. That's where our episodes go up first. You can follow us on there and like any of our posts. We really appreciate that. We're on Facebook, Blood and Black Rum Podcast. Like us. We have a group as well. So if you want to join our group and post a discussion about any of the films that we cover, we can talk about that. And we are on Twitter. It's at Blood and Black Rum because of the text limitations. We can't do Blood and Black Rum Podcast. So Blood and Black Rum, N as in Nancy. Tweet us on there. We do post each of our episodes on there. Not much more than that right now because I do handle 2 different Twitter accounts and it's difficult. But you can always hit us up on that and we'll respond back to you. We have an email address, bloodandblackrumpodcast@gmail.com. Send us your requests for any movies that you want us to cover and we will definitely try to get on that. We appreciate hearing any nice feedback from you. We also have a website, bloodandblackrumpodcast.wordpress.com. I try to post each of our episodes on there. Not more than that, but it's a good place to keep up to date with us, so make sure you check that out. And we also have a Patreon account, patreon.com/bloodandblackrumpodcast. You can subscribe to us on there. You can follow us. You can donate to us. Any donation will be repeated every month. So if you donate $1, you'll donate $1 a month. It helps us keep our podcast going. Helps us with things like subscription fees and SoundCloud fees and things like that. So definitely, if you can, please donate to us, and we really appreciate anything that you can give to us. Thank you for that, and thank you for all of the subscribers that we have on there right now. Other than that, just make sure that you are promoting us and letting everybody know that you like us. Make sure you check out our podcast network. It's Ace Podcast Network. There's a lot of great podcasts on there, so check them out. And thank you for listening. And we'll be back next week in our Death Wish series with Death Wish 3, which I'm excited for, and I know Martin is as well. So thank you for listening. We'll see you next week from the Blood and Black Rum Podcast.
Take care.